Bom, boa tarde a todos. Antes de mais nada, quero agradecer em nome do Grupo Positivo, da Positivo Informática, por esse convite. Estar aqui com vocês. Mr. Giuliani, I was assigned by the people here from HSM to come up with all the questions to ask you. So, have some responsibility here, okay?
Yes.
I'd like to start with some personal questions, if you will. So, you mentioned you're married. How many children you have?
I have 2 children and a stepchild.
How old are they?
My son is 23, my stepdaughter is 22, and my daughter is 19.
Okay. And do you think they see you as the leader the world sees?
Do they see me as the leader?
That everybody else sees
Only
in
when
you?
they want to. And only when it fits what they want. Children are different.
And who's the leader, the real leader or the boss at home?
In my family?
Yes.
My wife.
Thought so. Okay.
I'm not a fool.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit about the challenge of time allocation between work and family?
There's no denying that it is a very difficult thing. It is very hard to be enormously consumed with your work and with success at your work, if there's anything complicated about it at all, and have the time that you should have to be as good a father as you'd like to be. Or same thing would be true as a mother. And there are trade-offs that happen as a result of it, and I think you're just fooling yourself if you think that there aren't. There are things you can do to compensate, though. For example, I found it easier to be a good father when I was the mayor than before and after. And the reason was I could set my own schedule most of the time.
How come?
Well, I told my children right from the beginning, I am going to be at as many of your events as I can be. If I can't, the only reason I can't is, the only time I can't set my schedule is if an emergency happens, and then I'll have to leave. But if there's no emergency, I will set my schedule around you. So here's what happened. My son used to play in grammar school, and then in high school, he played sports. So he played basketball, hockey, and football. And I went to almost all of his games, except if there was an emergency. Because I could leave work at 2 o'clock, come back at 5, and then I could require everybody else to work from 5 to 9, because I was the mayor. And I could, if my son had a game late on a Friday afternoon, I could go to that game and have the meeting on Saturday morning at Gracie Mansion, because I set the schedule. If my daughter had a play in the middle of the day, I could go. When I was a lawyer in private practice, I couldn't do that because my clients' demands were greater than my own. And now, even in the business that I'm in, I have less flexibility. But when I was the mayor, in a strange way, I found it easier to do all the things you want to do as a father, because it meant I had to work really hard, but it also meant I could carve out the periods of time where they, where they needed me. Plus, I would invite them to come and be with me. I mean, my son has walked in the middle of some of the most, even when I was U.S. attorney, I would take him to work with me on Saturdays. And one time we were negotiating a very intense business negotiation and a guilty plea in which somebody was going to go to prison. And my son ran in the middle of it and wanted to know where his fire truck was. So you have strange things that happen when you bring your children with you, but I think it creates a bond with them.
Great. What about working out? Because you seem to keep a very energetic and lively way of leading your life. So do you work out? Do you take care of your body?
I do. Every morning, I begin the day by doing some exercise, usually about 15 minutes. I don't have time for much more than that.
And do you think that's important for a leader?
Well, actually, I don't know if it's important for my body. It wakes me up.
No, but for leaders, like...
I imagine it is. But if I didn't do it, I would have come up here at 9:30 in the morning, and I would have fallen asleep while I was giving the speech. It's the thing I do to wake myself up, and I think it allows me to have more energy. It allows me to function later in the day. I do several other things too. I put time aside to play sports. Mm-hmm. I try very hard to play golf once a week, if I can, twice a week. And when I do, I try to cut out all business so I have a period of time where I'm not thinking about all of these things.
Change the
Because like I
page.
said, I think if you give yourself periods of time not to think about your problems, when you get back to the problem, you come up with a better solution.
It's
You get
similar to
more
the shower effect.
the shower effect, but then using sports. I read a lot, not just about my business or my cases, but I read a lot of other things to stimulate my mind. And I love classical music, so I listen to it all the time.
Okay.
So that, and I can it'll help me contemplate, it'll help me think. But I think you need to create time like that for yourself.
Off work.
Off work that gets you out of the pressures of it. Depends on you. Somebody might want to, I'm not a long distance runner. I've done running in my life, but it doesn't have the same impact for me as 15 minutes of exercise, push-ups, sit-ups, running in place. That has more of an effect for me, and I know I can do it. If I tried to run for an hour a day, I would do it for a week, and then I would find it too much of an intrusion into my life.
Okay. What was the most important lesson taught to you by either your parents or a teacher?
Well, the most important lesson, at least in recent years, that I've used a lot, that my father taught me, was to remain calm in a crisis. He used to say, for reasons I do not know, and I can't ask him, he died a number of years ago, he used to say, if you're ever in a fire, become the calmest person in the room.
Did he actually say that?
Said it, exactly said it that way.
Do you
And
think he predicted?
No,
the-
I don't know what he was thinking about. I mean, there used to be a lot of fires in those days in Brooklyn, so maybe he was thinking about, God forbid, if there was a fire in our house. So if you're ever in a fire, become the calmest person in the room. He'd say, even if you're not calm, pretend that you are, and it will help you make good decisions.
Okay.
And I use that many times in life for things that I thought were emergencies, and I don't think I really understood what an emergency was until September 11. But if I had to make a very difficult and quick decision in court, I'd say, okay, I only have 30 seconds to think about this, calm down, and just concentrate all your energies on just thinking about it, and not getting so worried about it.
You mentioned that once you took an aptitude test, that helped you become a lawyer, right? I'd like you to comment a little bit on the responsibility that a leader has in terms of interfering or trying to make a difference in a person's goals or their future for whatever they wish to do.
I'm a big believer that people do well what they like to do. And maybe I am because it happened to me. I didn't know what I wanted to do as a high school and college student. I wanted to be a priest for a long part of my life. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a reporter. I wanted to be everything you could think of. I wanted to be a pilot. I mean, went through so many different things. My parents thought I would never be anything. I took a test my third year of college. It was an aptitude test where you just punch these little holes in things. I don't remember what the questions were, but I remember taking the test. And I had a college advisor who was a psychology professor, and he would evaluate these tests. And he sat down with the test, and he said, this test shows that you have an aptitude for being a lawyer because you have very strong ability to reason, to think logically, to proceed with a logical argument. I never knew that, thought about it. So that motivated me to go to law school. And he gave me a piece of advice. He said, you're going to be happy in life if you do what you do well. If you find something that fits your aptitude, you'll do it well. That brings a lot of positive reinforcement, and you'll have a very happy life. So I always advise young people to try to figure out what you like to do and follow that as your career path. Don't try to do something that comes really hard to you.
Yeah.
Because you're probably not going to do it as well. You're not going to get the same success out of it. Even try to do something that makes you happy. Most of the times that I have gone to work, and I feel very fortunate about this, I'm happy about what I'm doing. I enjoy what I'm doing, and I think it makes me do it better.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. On a personal note, I actually graduated as a dentist here in Brazil and I switched to marketing and management a long, long time ago, so I know exactly what you're saying.
Because you enjoy it more.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. It brings
Now-
out more of you.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Changing the subject a little bit, talking about public safety. If you could you accept the challenge of being Rio de Janeiro's mayor? What would you do to fight violence and crime over here?
Well, I would not be mayor of a city that I'm not, that I don't know and that I'm not part of. And you have to be humble about this and realize that every city has its own problems and no one solution works. But I do think, if I could advise not just the mayor of Rio de Janeiro, but the mayor of any place, any American, European, Latin American, Asian city that wants to reduce crime, I would use the CompStat program because it's a universal program. It's not a program built to analyze one crime problem or another, or the crime problem of one ethnic group or another, or it's basically, it analyzes crime problems and tells you how different your crime problem is and how to respond to it. It's merely making sure that you are keeping up with the crimes that are taking place. It requires a good record-keeping system. It requires basic computer technology. And then it can create a strategy for how to reduce crime and how to use your resources most effectively, which is, after all, part of the problem. None of these cities, whether it's Rio or New York or Chicago, whatever, can have the resources you'd really like to have. So the CompStat system allows you to make use of your somewhat limited resources, and it puts it right where the problem is. That's what I would recommend, and if I were mayor of any place, I would utilize it.
Mm-hmm. About leadership and popularity, do you believe these are controversial skills?
Mm-hmm. They can be. They sometimes can be consistent, and they can sometimes be inconsistent. I think that a leader that is too worried about popularity ultimately erodes as a leader and becomes a follower. Mm-hmm. If your constant goal is being popular, then you will necessarily be changing your opinions to fit what is most popular. And you may not be changing them because you really believe that they're wrong. You may be doing it in order to be popular. And ultimately, you're not leading, you're being led. And then people lose respect for you.
Usually you come up with this question that are leaders born or made? Did you ever plan to become such a leader?
Mm-mm. Never thought about it that way. Now that I look back on it, I realize that I educated myself to be a leader. And my book, Leadership, is a lot about that. It's about how that happened. And I'd like to see it done in reverse. I'd like to see it done in a more organized way for people, particularly in this era in which I think we have a need for even more leaders or stronger leadership capacities for the reason I said, because of the information revolution. I think people have to sort through and are being deluged with information to such an extent they have to develop a way of preserving their uniqueness in order to be a leader. And I think it should be taught. I think it should be taught as a course. I think if I had one in college, a course on leadership, I'd have developed faster and I'd have developed better, rather than having taken a whole lifetime to figure this out.
Yeah, you know that I work for Grupo Positivo, and of course we are the largest educational group in Brazil. If you had to come up with a program on leadership, what kind of courses would you create?
What kind of course would I create? I never thought of it that way, but I took a course in college that would be a fairly good model for it. And it has an interesting name because it's somewhat similar, and it may have given me this idea subliminally when I didn't even know it. I took a course in the third year of college, I believe it was. I even remember the teacher, Brother Joseph. I went to a Christian Brothers college. And the name of the course was American Political Leadership. And what he did was, he had you read the biography. The course was a 3-credit course, if I recall correctly. And so it wasn't a big course. And he had you read about 12 biographies of American political leaders that he selected to kind of from different areas. Some Republicans, some Democrats, some liberals, some conservatives, some community leaders, and with a different group of leaders. He had you read those and then discuss the characteristics that made them effective, that worked. And it was a very interesting course. I was a government political science major, so it was one of many courses that I took. So I would do it that way. I would teach by example. I would teach by, one very good way to teach a course on leadership is to read biographies. I learned a lot about leadership, not knowing it, by reading biographies. I worked for Ronald Reagan, but I think even if I didn't work for Ronald Reagan, I would have learned many of the same things I learned by reading all the biographies of Ronald Reagan. I've read almost every biography of Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill has been a hero of mine since I was a little boy. And I think I learned things from Winston Churchill about leadership when I was reading those books that I didn't realize I was learning for that purpose. To such an extent that the evening of September 11, when I went home after the first day of the attack, and I got home about 2 in the morning, and I couldn't sleep, I just happened to have on my bedstand a recently released new biography of Churchill by Jenkins, big thick biography. I immediately went to the part of the biography that described 1940, and when he was made Prime Minister of England in the middle of the German assault on England. And I thought this will be a perfect thing to read, to give me some inspiration and to give me some feeling and sense of how to deal with this. Because what he was dealing with was worse than what I would have to deal with in the next week and months ahead, because I was dealing with one attack. And at that time, I thought there'd be more. I thought we'd have 2 or 3 more attacks. But I said I knew there'd be limited number of attacks, 2 or 3, because of our technology. I knew we could prevent massive attacks. He had to deal with an attack every day, going to bed at night, not knowing who was going to die, get up the next morning and get a city to go back to work. And I wanted to see how he did it.
And it actually helped me for the next question. A little bit about crisis management. Could you share with us where exactly were you on the morning of 9/11? How did you react? How did you find out? And what were the first decisions you had to make?
I was at the Peninsula Hotel on 55th Street and 5th Avenue. If you know New York, you would know that's sort of right in the middle of Manhattan, which is one of New York's 5 boroughs.
That was around 8:30 in the morning?
It was well, I began breakfast about 8 in the morning, and I was having breakfast with one co-worker and really one of my closest friends, Dennison Young, who's been my counsel and lawyer and law partner for 26 years, and with another good friend, and we were having a very nice breakfast talking about my friend's thought of running for governor of California. And he eventually did run for governor of California. But that's what we were talking about. And the breakfast ended, and at about 9 o'clock, a little before 9 o'clock, one of the police officers that was part of my security detail, Patty Verone, walked up to Denny Young, my counsel, and whispered something to him. And I could see Denny was concerned. He stood up, came over to me, put his arm on me and said, "I think we're going to have to go downtown." He said that there is a twin-engine plane that hit the North Tower, and we're going to have to get there. So I didn't know at the beginning how bad it was. And I said goodbye, walked out on the street, and when I walked out on the street, first thing I did was look up in the sky, and I saw a beautiful, clear, blue sky. And I said to myself, this cannot be an accident. No plane would have gotten off course that much on a day like today. So I eliminated the possibility of an accident, and I was working with the possibility of a terrorist attack or a singularly deranged individual who was trying to exact revenge for some reason of theirs, by hitting a particular maybe business in that building, or and we occasionally have that insane kind of thing happen. So I started rushing down, and as I was getting closer and closer, I kept realizing that it was worse than I was told, because the fires were tremendous at the top of the building. And I was rushing down, And there was a calculation about going there. And it's a debatable one. I mean, other people that would talk about crisis might come to a different conclusion. I believe, have always believed, and will always believe in leading from the front. I believe you have to be there. You have to see it. You have to feel it in order to make good decisions about it. I learned that as an investigator and a prosecutor. I'd always go to the scene of the crime. It always gave me insights that just having it described to me wouldn't. I could see maybe an obstruction that made a witness testimony untruthful, or they couldn't see what they said they saw, or maybe made it truthful. And in doing emergencies, I always wanted to see how bad was it, because sometimes people exaggerate it to you in their emotion. And they get so excitable, and so you react too much. Or some people react or underreact. They're very calm, and so you don't get a real sense of what you're dealing with unless you go there. So I was rushing there to go there to evaluate what I thought was a fire. And I did that all the time. About a mile away, I saw a tremendous second explosion. Didn't know what it was, and then got a call from the police within seconds, and they said a second plane had hit. And that's when I knew it was a terrorist attack. We were trying to get through the White House to get air support to protect the city from further attack, because we thought there would be 3 or 4 more attacks. We were engaged in the process of deploying the police to other parts of the city because we thought there'd be other attacks there. And from the very beginning, I made a decision with the police commissioner and the fire commissioner, which I think was very helpful to us in dealing with this for weeks ahead. And I decided to separate our response and put someone in charge of the relief and recovery effort, saving the lives of the people at the site, and have the fire department focus on that with help from the police department and everybody else.
Did you come yourself up with these ideas, or was like a group of people working?
Yeah, I did. I did because I wanted a second command post.
Okay.
I immediately, when I was having difficulty with my cell phone getting through, I told the police commissioner to set up a separate command post with hard lines, because I wanted telephone lines. I didn't want to rely on cell phones because we were having difficulty reaching the White House. We were having difficulty reaching the governor. We were having difficulty reaching the rest of the city. And I immediately segmented it into 2 responses. One response is to save the lives of the people at the site. The second response is not to forget about the rest of the city, because I thought there would be other attacks in the rest of the city. And even if there weren't other attacks in the rest of the city, millions of people still lived there who were having heart attacks, who were being the victims of crime, who needed to be taken to hospitals. So I said I want the police department to focus out on the rest of the city and protect it, and I want the fire department to focus on the relief and recovery effort to save as many lives as possible.
And may I ask you, what do you think was the most difficult decision you had to make during that day? Or during that
day.
Or maybe the day after.
You know something? During that day, the decisions were made so fast. The decisions were made so fast that they were all difficult. But they weren't difficult to make because I just had to make them.
Mm-hmm. Intuition.
I almost call it guessing. Yes, do that. And then I would stop and I'd say a little prayer. I hope it's right. Mm-hmm. I hope I made it correctly. I don't know what the most difficult decision that I made was. I mean, some of them had a tremendous amount of emotion attached to them. They weren't necessarily difficult, but when we started talking about having to get body bags and how many body bags we needed to have.
Did you know anyone in the towers?
I knew many, many people that died, and some of them were good friends of mine. So I was suffering personal loss at the time. First person that I was told died was Father Michael Judge. Father Michael Judge was a Franciscan priest who was the chaplain of the fire department. He was with me every time we would watch a firefighter get injured or die. He was with me holding my hand as well as the hand of the family and teaching me how to deal with the families. I didn't know how to do that. And Father Judge was my spiritual advisor. He sort of put himself in that role. Whenever I would have difficulties or problems, he'd write me wonderful notes and give me advice. And as it started, and I was watching this, I saw Father Judge about 20 minutes before he died. I saw him rushing toward the building as I was going to the command post, and I just grabbed his hand, and I said, "Father, pray for us." And he usually, I did that many times. I used to tease him and say, "Pray for us." And he would smile and laugh at me and say, "You know something, you should do the praying because it'd be more unusual." And then I would laugh, and then we'd move on. This time he didn't do that. He just looked very serious, and he looked very concerned, and he looked very upset. And he said, "I will," and moved on. I think he had already been to the scene, so he already knew how bad it was. I was just finding out. And when I got to the scene, I found out, really, when I saw all the people that were jumping from the building. It was the first one that I saw just froze me. I never saw anything like that before. Someone was jumping from 100 floors to flee the flames behind them. And that gave me the sense that this was very different and, boy, you know, way above anything we had ever handled before.
So that was 8 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Looking back, do you think you would have done anything differently today?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I think I would have made everything, all of our preparations, much bigger than they were, because we never really calculated how big the response to something like this is. I'll tell you how it reflected itself. Our 911 system was way overloaded with calls. That's the emergency call system in America. And it was almost functionless because it was overwhelmed with calls. We had the biggest 911 system in the country. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we have the biggest one in the world, but we certainly do in the United States. And we always thought it actually was too big, right? And it turned out we were wrong. It wasn't big enough. And I can give you many things like that where we did many scenarios of terrorist attacks and crises and emergencies, but we never really imagined one that would be this big. We had to set up a family center. We had done that for airplane crashes, so we knew how to do that. The first one we selected, the governor and I selected, was too small. We had to move out of it within 3 days. The first command center we set up at the police academy was too small. We had to move out of that in 3 or 4 days to a pier where we had an endless amount of space because the resources kept growing and growing and growing. So I think if I had a chance to do it again, I would have anticipated a much larger response, and I think we would have responded faster as a result of it.
Say in like 50 years from today, what would you like to be remembered by?
You know, I don't think about that much. I find it very eerie thinking about legacies. I guess I'd like to be remembered for the things I did to turn around New York City. And the part that I would like to be remembered for is not necessarily reducing the crime or changing the welfare or straightening out the economy or straightening out the budget or even handling September 11th. I'd like to be remembered for what I really tried to do, which is change the spirit of New York City. Mm-hmm. I believed it was my job to change that poll that I told you about, where 65% of the people wanted to leave the city. I thought it was my job to change it into 65-70% wanted to remain there and thought it had a great future. Because I thought if that poll changed that way, then I would have changed all those little things that were wrong to something that gave people hope. And what I really think a political leader has to do is to give people hope, but not the false impression of hope. You have to deliver on that. And I think I did deliver on it, and I wish I would be remembered for that.
That's good. Final question. After you leave Earth, do you believe in God?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so after you leave this earth and you have the chance of facing God, what would be your first words to him?
Well, this is going to be a very difficult situation because I'm a lawyer. And there's a great joke about lawyers, you know. There's a great joke about lawyers that that goes like this. A doctor, a priest, and a lawyer die on the same day. And they go up to heaven, and they face St. Peter. And St. Peter looks at the doctor, and he says, "Doctor, you saved many lives. I'm going to give you a wonderful condominium in a beautiful part of heaven." And the second one is the priest, and he says, "Father, I'm going to give you an even better condominium in a nicer part of heaven because you helped so many people and saved so many souls." And then he looks at the lawyer, and he says, "You're a lawyer?" And the lawyer says, "Yes, I'm going to give you the biggest mansion in the best part of heaven with the best view." So the doctor and the priest get annoyed, and they say, "How come he's getting the big mansion? You know, we save souls and we save lives, and all he ever did is take people's money. How come he's getting the best mansion?" And St. Peter says, "He's getting the best mansion because he's the first one here since Thomas More in the 14th century."
Okay.
So what I do is I'm storing up all the good things that I've done so that I can argue my case, because he's going to have available to him all the bad things I've done, and I'm trying to overwhelm him with the good things, and I hope it works.
No, but I think we all here believe that you've stated a very, very good case. Thank you
you.
so much. We're running out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.